Like, come on. Well, as you can see, today is the day that everyone's been waiting for. I'm gonna review it. You guys have been messaging me on Instagram, on Twitter, and fucking everything saying, when are you guys gonna talk about it? When are you gonna talk about it? Because I know I finished it about a month ago, and people have been asking me what I thought about it. It's without a doubt Stephen King's probably most prolific work that everyone knows him for. I'd say maybe that and The Shining. So yeah, everyone knows it, especially with the release of the films that came out not too long ago. This has been all the rage recently, and I'm very glad I finally read it. I'm not going to waste your time. Right off the bat, I'm just going to tell you, I love this book. Period, point blank. I think it's phenomenal. At its heart, it is about childhood friendships and the bonds you make with your friends during childhood that can never and will never be replaced. And this theme is so beautifully carried out throughout the book, and the character work is brilliant and flawless. And when I finished this book, I was just for weeks after reminiscing about my childhood and the friendships I have and what I would do to get that back. And this book just absolutely nails it home, and you might be a little bit sad when you're done reading it. Now, I think that was such a treat because I went into this book expecting good scares, good character work, and overall a good story. But what I was not expecting was this super intellectual, emotionally deep diving exploration of the themes I've previously mentioned. And it was such a surprise to know that this book goes so far beyond what it is marketed as and what it is portrayed as in its adaptations. I don't mind when an adaptation goes a completely separate route and becomes about a different thing, as long as they're keeping key elements from the primary story. For example, The Shining, one of my favorite movies of all time. I might like it even more than the book, but the book and the movie are about two separate things in The Shining. And it is the same thing here. The movie is about a scary clown that these kids have to band together to defeat. That's certainly in the book, but that is not by any means what the point of the book is to get across, and that is not what the book's primary intention is. The book's main intention is not to scare you. The book's main intention is to make you feel these emotional connections and rekindle the memories of friendship that you have from your childhood. And it does it so well. And I think it is a little bit disappointing because media has given this book a false presentation, so therefore people go into it with false expectations of this horror fest, of this frightening, scary odyssey that these kids go on, and it is that. But I think people are often underwhelmed by the scares because that is not what takes up the majority of the page count. Because majority of the page count is character development and interactions between the children when the clown is absent from it, or whether it's in clown form, werewolf form, mummy form, shark form, bird form, anything. That takes a back seat. Many great passages through the books have nothing to do with the clown, and I'm completely fine with that, and I loved that. So on the note of the things that I loved about the book, I'm just going to gush about that for a bit. And the first thing I want to talk about right now is how brilliant the primary cast of characters is and how diverse they are. And it's really well executed if you've seen the adaptations, the different personalities of the kids, but we have so much time to learn with them and grow with them. And the book takes place in their childhood over about, I'd say, an entire summer plus a few months prior. And we learn and grow with them as their friendship forms and they meet one another and they become a group. And it's a great choice that they start off with Ben, the new kid, and he's kind of our guide through Derry, learning about Derry and experiencing it. Every character has so many strengths, and it's not just quite as surface level as Beverly's teased for being the first girl to reach maturity, or Richie's the trash mouth comedian, and Ben's fat, and Stan's Jewish, and all that. There's all these surface level things about them, which we can see in the adaptations, but it's what really goes beyond that and how they're affected by that and what makes them who they are and how they overcome these things. And when we see them as adults, it's so brilliant to see how their childhood bonds and their childhood experiences that they had throughout the town of Derry, not relating to it, the villain, but just so how they were treated amongst the community and amongst the townspeople, how that affects them in their childhood, and how that power and that experience all comes back around to use against it, the creature that is terrorizing them and the town. Which leads me into my next point, and which is one of the most brilliant things about this book, is how much lore and backstory and exploration they give us on the community of Derry as a whole and the people who've inhabited it since the dawn of time. Going back to The Shining, the Overlook Hotel has a rich history as well, but we only see glimpses of it, whether it's Jack going through a scrapbook or Danny seeing past visions while entering rooms, whereas it tells these incredible stories of Derry's past and how the entity that is it has terrorized them and how it's influenced the direction of the town since literally time began. We hear great stories, whether it's from Henry Bowers' father or whether it's from Mike Hanlon's father who worked on the farm, and all these little nuances, and we can really see this massive sprawling history of how monumental the creature is that is terrorizing this town, because it has literally influenced every major event that has led this town to become what it is. And on that note, I just want to say we got some great cameos from other Stephen King universe characters who pop up here and there, and so that was a great treat. And on the note of minor characters, that's another great thing I loved. The minor characters in this who have, like, they're there for one chapter or, you know, a few little passages, even just a sentence, are all so great and have such personality to them. So even when we take time away from the group as a whole, and it might be just Eddie going to pick up his medication, Mr. Keene, who runs the pharmacy, plays a very minor role in the story, but seeing the role that he plays and just interacting with Eddie, the character is so well done. Or whether it's minor spoilers here, but Henry Bowers, when he gets locked up, the guard and the character where it goes into the guards in the institution he's locked up in, they only are in it for about 5 or 6 pages, but we see how their fears are preyed upon by it. Yeah, I just think it was so brilliant. And there are good scares as well. I don't want to send the message that this book is not frightening at times. It absolutely is. I know I've been talking about the character work and the setting and the themes more so a bit, but believe me, when it starts running rampant amongst Derry and we see the terror that it brings with it, it is good stuff. And I love that we see the true extent of its powers and abilities and shape-shifting in the creatures that it inhabits. Yes, the clown is a big persona that it takes on, but there are so many other ones that I think are so underrated, such as a werewolf, a mummy, a massive Rodan-type bird, a huge shark, a clown with a pit bull's head. So many brilliant aspects are so cool, or even multiple dead children. And there are so many great encounters with it, and we really see the true extent of its power, and that has never been explored in any of the mediums we've seen this in other than the text. Because this book is about 1,200 pages, and every adaptation has used only about 100 to 200, 250 at max of content in this book. So there are literally 900 to 1,000 more pages of lore and exploration that we could see within these characters. I'm dying for an HBO miniseries. It would be so good. And the last thing I really want to talk about here is the prose in this book. There are some of Stephen King's most brilliant prose, especially in the last 200 pages. It's got a beautiful ending. I know Stephen King kind of is infamous for having some rough endings. I've liked all the endings I've come across by Stephen King, but I can see why some people don't. The ending of this book is so beautiful and captures the theme flawlessly. And I'd like to read a very, very short passage here, which I think is the most beautiful passage in the book, and I will be getting tattooed on my body. These were his friends, and his mother was wrong. They weren't bad friends. Maybe, he thought. There aren't any such things as good friends or bad friends. Maybe there are just friends. People who stand by you when you're hurt, and who help you feel not so lonely. Maybe they're worth being scared for, and hoping for, and living for. Maybe worth dying for, too, if that's what has to be. No good friends, no bad friends. Only people you want, need to be with. People who build their houses in your heart. Like, come on! Now, I know if I don't say any negatives, all you guys are going to tear me apart in the comments who don't like this book. So I'll give you this. There are some people who don't enjoy the pacing, which is totally fine. If you are in this to experience the thrill of them chasing and defeating this monster and working together, how they're going to do it, absolutely, there are going to be some passages, like I'm talking like 200 pages worth of times where it's just character development and the kids hanging out and just kind of growing their bond, which still is relevant to the story. I can understand how that might take you out of it a little bit. For example, there is a large segment where they go to the movies and they encounter Henry Bowers and they get into a big scrap with him. It's not the rock fight. That's a little bit more relevant to the story. And like there are passages before and after that when the summer is just kind of reaching a plateau. And if you're like, all right, let's get this thing moving, like I want to know what happens, I completely get why you might feel that way. But I was completely happy with it because I really like spending time with the characters on a personal level. So this didn't bother me at all. And of course, there is that infamous scene. And now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, there is a scene at the very close to end of the book that involves some preteens having sex. And yes, it's weird. And yes, I understand if that completely obliterates your momentum of the ending of the story. But I'll say this, that is way too complex of a passage of the book and its relevance to the plot to just for me to say it's good, it's bad, it belongs there, it doesn't belong there. It is a very complex scene with about this many pages of context going into it and the story behind it and its relevance for being there. So I'm not going to sit here and say, well, it's actually a lot fucking better if you understand what you're talking about. And I'm not going to say, like, it's the worst thing I've ever read, it's disgusting. Like, it's in a book that's about 1,000 pages. You can't just denounce one scene out of context, you know? And there are a lot of people who like to do that, and there's all these articles. And I'm like, have you guys read the book? Because a lot of people, like, go off on this. And I understand how you might think it's inappropriate, but there are a lot of people who say it's inappropriate, and their points for it being inappropriate are, like, really bad. So if you think it's inappropriate, that's fine, and there are good reasons to think that. But there are some people who are like, this is so, it came out of so left field, it has nothing to do with anything. And I'm like, I think you missed a good portion of the book if you think that. I'll say that. And on that note, I think all in all, I have never in my life seen a book more disrespected than this. This book is so well crafted and so well written. Even if you don't like the book that much and there are things that take you out of it, I think that there's this large group of people who write it off as like, oh, it's a coke-fueled mess and you can really tell he was high as shit when he wrote it. It's like, no. And if you do think, because, oh, there's intergalactic space turtles. Yes, there's intergalactic space turtles. And cosmic entities and all of this, like, mind warping going on and stuff like that. Do you really think that creative ideas like that can only be achieved while doing drugs? If so, please expand your art taste. Because, yes, I can understand how you can be like, that's such an outlandish concept. But the thing is, yes, he was on drugs when he wrote this, and he claims to not remember writing it, which is fine. But the point is, even if he didn't remember it, he still wrote back, did numerous drafts of the book, and to write it off as like a coke-fueled mess, or the big thing I see all the time is, cocaine is one hell of a drug. It's like, yeah, he was on drugs while he wrote it, but to write this entire piece off as this abysmal mishmash of ideas that were all like half executed, I think is such a... I think you really should give it a second go without letting the internet tell you what to think. And I know I'm the internet and I'm telling you what to think right now, but there are just so many articles and takes out there from people who I don't think have actually read the book, especially in movie reviews, people saying like, you know, what I've said before. And I think that this book is so brilliant and so creative too. This book is so creative, and to act like concepts like this and some of the more outlandish themes can only be inspired through drug use is so like such a write-off to so many artists who are trying to think outside the box of what horror can be and what villains can be and what creatures can be, because It/Pennywise is one of the most creative villains in the entire backlog of the history of the art form. So, and then people think because there's all of these like crazy outlandish ideas, it must have been drugs then. Better idea, it might just be the fact that Stephen King is a creative author. ever think about that? Point is, I love the book. I know I got a little heated there at the end. I think it's such a brilliant book, and it just makes me sad to see this book so disrespected. Because I have no problem with you disliking the book. I've actually a lot of really great people who deconstruct the book and hate it for other reasons, especially on the Stephen King Reddit. This is like one of the most talked about books on there. And there are some great takes about like how there are a lot of people that think this is his worst book. There are a lot of people that think it's his best book. And the people that think it's his worst book have some really interesting arguments that I really appreciate and love, and I can see how they can be made. But, oh my god. To the people who are just like reading little summaries on the internet and acting like they've really delved into this and experienced this odyssey of this like 27-year-long quest of a group of friends. Wrong! Wrong! Anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this little video, and more reviews coming soon.